Hi, welcome to the Swim Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Roxana Perdue. My guest today is Derek Wall. He is the executive director of the Triangle Aquatic Center. Derek is responsible for starting the club team TAC Titans here in Cary, North Carolina, and is a seasoned entrepreneur who built and sold a successful pool management firm before returning to lead TAC and the Titans program into their next chapter. Around the pool deck, he's a certified swim coach and a high performance athlete in his own right. A resident of Cary, Derek is an avid triathlete who's somehow still getting faster in his 40s, all while navigating the chaos of raising two kids under the age of 4. He also happens to have a front row seat to decades of world-class excellence because his wife, Ashley Twitchell, is a multi-time world champion and Olympic open water swimmer who continues to compete at the highest level. From overcoming major injuries to mastering the business of aquatics, Derek joins us to share his unique perspective on the pursuit of excellence. Please enjoy my interview today with Derek Wall. Hi, Derek.
Hey, happy to be here.
Derek was one of the first people that I talked to when I wanted to get the podcast going and help connect me to a lot of the people I've already had on the pod. So thank you so much for your help with that.
Oh, it's such a good idea, and you're giving the people what they need. So, yeah, thanks for doing this. It's pretty awesome. It's been great information. I've listened to all of them so far, and it's really good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. All of the people that you've connected me to are just extremely knowledgeable. So it's been easy just to ask them a lot of questions and get some great feedback, great conversations going. So
Great.
thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem.
You posted and shared a series of memos in the last couple of months with the headline, More Than Performance, How TAC Supports Lifelong Success. And I'll put a link to where people can find these memos on the TAC website in the podcast show notes. The memos have a lot of great information for parents and swimmers about swimmer development, movement, and building skills. The most recent memo, though, is the one I want to talk about today, fueling, focusing, and recovery. And specifically, I want to talk about that because it's February. Short course season is wrapping up. A lot of swimmers are preparing for age group championship meet this month and the senior championship meet this month and a few more meets in March that'll kind of wrap up the season. So I'd love to highlight some of the things that stood out that I think could be helpful for parents and swimmers while the swimmers mentally and physically prepare for those meets. First thing that stood out was a section called What a Swim Meet Really Demands. And as a parent, I've seen how exhausting a meet weekend is for my swimmer, but I'd love to understand a little bit better about why it's exhausting. What are the demands of, say, a 4-day championship meet?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Especially a lot of parents. My parents included. Swimming is foreign, right? It's they grew
Yeah.
up playing basketball and playing baseball and watching traditional ball sports, and the idea of a 4-day competition where you swim, you know, anywhere between three and 8, 9, 10 events, on their schedule. It is foreign, it's new, and a lot of times the race volume itself can seem short compared to what a swimmer is doing in practice every day and every week. And so, it's easy to be confused when you get to
Mm-hmm.
Sunday and your swimmer isn't acting like themselves, and they've poured so much of themselves into training for the past 6 months, and they can seem a little flat on Sunday. And
Mm-hmm.
you're just multiple days in a row. You have early morning warm ups. You're staying late at finals, whether you're swimming or supporting your teammates. Hopefully,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there can be long periods between races, which,
Yeah.
on the surface, that can lead to, you've got time to rest between races. But what that really means is that athletes are making these same sorts of decisions over and over and over again. Like, how much do I warm up? When do I start my warm up? When do I put on my tech suit? When do I eat before a race? When do I do
Mhm.
pace with my coach? There's just so much that goes into preparing for a single race, even if it's a 50-yard sprint. That is, it's just a cumulative load on your energy systems. Um,
Mhm.
and it demands a lot. I mean, you're in a loud atmosphere. There's a lot going on. There's flashing lights. There's sometimes two pools running at the same time. There's a
Yeah.
stand full of people who, you know, have expectations for how you're going to swim. You have your coaches who have expectations for you, and you don't want to let anyone down. It's a lot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I imagine, especially for these championship meets, the emotions are running high. It's at a peak those weekends.
Yeah, it is. And, uh, kids are worried about, what their friends, what their peers are going those times, the time goals they've set for themselves, whether their times are going to be good enough to move into the group they want to be at next season. Um, there's just, a lot of opportunities for stressors that are not necessarily related to just putting your head down and swimming the race. And so, our job as a support system and an athlete's job in a lot of ways is to try to dial down those external stressors where we can.
When you're in the thick of it, you can't turn the volume down necessarily. You can't, reduce the number of events that you're swimming. What are your recommendations for what they can do in between the events or in between the sessions, that's helpful?
So I think that the number one area that is a worthy use of your energy is focusing on fueling and recovery. And, that can help, take your mind off of other things, which can help a lot. Or your fueling is going to support not only your actual race, so the physical output in the pool, but it's also going to support your emotional regulation, your ability to um, your ability to recover and be
Mhm.
ready for the next event or whatever is next for you. If it's the end of the meet weekend, you're likely going to pick up and go to school the next day or work the next morning. So um, you have to have the energy for that as well. And so I think focusing on fueling and recovery is a great use of time.
So that looks like having snacks in between events, and what else? The memo you mentioned hydrating as well. Most swimmers have what, 3 more than 1 event a day, right? And then the
Hmm.
older swimmers have prelims and finals. So you've got that time, like you said, in between events. How do you space out the fueling and the hydration in a way that benefits?
Yeah. So every athlete is going to be different.
Mhm.
But most athletes will benefit from focusing on more frequent smaller intakes of their carbs, sodium, potassium, electrolytes basically. Um, and I don't even think I mentioned protein in the article that I published, but that's because everyone, they're like, oh, recovery, you need protein, like that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so common. And it's true, right? But protein is more the building blocks for your long-term success, right? You need
Mhm.
to repair the damage being done to your muscles. Um is so protein, having that, intake is important long term, but actually for your event, for your championship weekend success and fueling throughout it, you need far more carbs and salt, potassium, etc. You need far more of those than you do protein, which is good news for a lot of swimmers or athletes because that's easier to digest than protein as well. It should look, very familiar to athletes. So whatever they normally eat at home, whatever is easy to digest, it tastes good, easy to get down, and doesn't upset their stomach, just eating small quantities of that. Personally, I like just a plain tortilla, like a flour tortilla rolled up. I'll go through a couple dozen of those, a
Nice.
race day, morning and the day before. But again, it's oatmeal, super, super simple, rice with salt, pasta with salt. Again, you want to make sure you're eating in smaller quantities. I always think about a swimmer. He's not on the national team anymore. He hadn't been in 6 or 7 years now. But his name was Dan O'Connor, and I went to a lot of races where he was swimming with my wife, and throughout an entire meet weekend, I never saw him without a little baggie of spaghetti. And he just made all of this spaghetti and put it in these little Ziploc bags. And just at the most random times, he would just be eating this plain spaghetti. It just, and that's perfect. That's exactly what an athlete
Yeah.
needs. And he had done it for a while and he was down to a science, but I just always think about Dan and his spaghetti because it
The
was just come out at the
spaghetti.
most random times. We're waiting for our Uber. I look over and he's just shoveling spaghetti in his mouth.
So I guess the key is just finding the carbs that work for you, right? Or
Finding
your
the carbs
swimmer.
that work for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and it's because society has pretty painted, I think, salt or sodium with this like broad negative brush. So a lot
Mhm.
of times that gets missed as well when you're hydrating, especially, but when you're eating your carbs too, you want to make sure your salt intake is adequate. If the carbs are the energy blocks for you to have enough energy to think, to focus, to perform, you can think about the salt as the electrical system that's going to be able to send those signals where they're supposed to go and keep you sharp and keep you focused. So you don't want to just overload your body with plain water because you'll be flushing out some things that you need and you can feel flat if that's the approach.
I'm glad you mentioned how fueling benefits the brain function too, because you mentioned that in the memo as well. So the fueling is not just for the athletes to swim well in the water, it's
Hmm.
also for helping focus and do what they need to do mentally as well.
That's right. Yeah. Focus,
Okay.
coordination, emotional regulation. Your brain uses a
That's
lot
a
of
good one.
energy. It's going to use so much energy just day to day. I've heard someone describe fueling like paying off a monthly credit card before. Like you don't want to not pay it off in full because then you get hit with that super high interest rate, right? And so fueling is the same way, like throughout a weekend or just throughout your training, but especially a long meet weekend, since that's what we're focused on. If you get let yourself get into an energy deficit or you miss a credit card payment, all of a sudden you're gonna owe your body that energy with interest. And so it can get hard to catch up, especially if you're a nervous eater or you just have a lot going on. It's hard to stay on top of it. You have a full event load. So, it's really important to stay on top of things. And oftentimes, especially with young athletes who seem to have, energy for days, right? Um, it can, a lack of fueling can actually show up first, not necessarily in their swimming times or performance, but it can show up in them being snappy and, just not acting like themselves. Withdrawing, emotional, just kind of being all over the place, super high, super low. A lot of that can can really be just lack of fuel, and they can seem like they're not motivated. A lot of that, oftentimes an age group athlete is just not being properly fueled, and they've gotten themselves into a deficit, and that's how it's being expressed.
I don't think I had ever thought about the emotional regulation part. So that's pretty key, especially for a championship weekend where the emotions are already going to be all over the place, right? Tensions are
Oh
high,
yeah.
emotions are high, And then without enough fuel, you won't handle that as well. You mentioned of kids being too nervous to eat and maybe staying on top of the small little snacks in case that's a concern. But in the memo, you also mentioned training the stomach. Could you talk about that a little bit? That's fascinating.
Yeah, the stomach is trainable, right? It's you can, if your meet's next week, it's probably a little bit too late. But, throughout the course of a season or, when you're preparing for practice each day, you can prepare your stomach to handle the fueling needs that you're going to need during a championship weekend. So, and that can look like making sure that you are eating before training sessions, before practice at the same frequency or period before you would race, making sure that you're intaking, even if you don't necessarily need that fuel to make it through an hour and a half, 2 hour long practice, you're going to be able to train your stomach to handle that. And you'll also just learn, while the stomach is trainable, some athletes are going to handle certain foods better than other foods. And so, you'll begin to understand what sits better for you, what gives you more energy. I mentioned tortillas being a favorite of mine, but I think I mentioned oatmeal as well. A good old, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I think that's, the classic NBA locker room, favorite pregame halftime snack. Uncrustables that every triathlete on the face of the earth,
Yes, that's
will
what I've
pound
heard.
Uncrustables. Yeah. It's all good. It's all good stuff. And there'll be something that your athlete likes. They do need to experiment with it and make sure that it's going to sit well for them. And if it doesn't the first time, then, maybe go back to it, right? Cut the dose in
Mhm.
half and start small and increase it each week until the stomach can handle. It's just like, your training when you start up after August break. You don't start with a full volume load first week in September. Your coach is going to increase it by, 10%, give or take a week until you're where you want to be. And you can do the same thing with your stomach.
We were talking a few minutes ago about the time in between events at the meet. In your memo, you mentioned phones and rest.
Hmm.
So, my question is scrolling on your phone the best way to pass time in between events? I know a lot of kids are tempted to do that or do that. And then, what are some better ways to spend time? We talked about fueling. So, maybe besides fueling, they still got some time to kill. Talk about phones and then maybe some alternative, healthier options.
Yeah. Yeah, phones are a tough one, and you see it a lot. If you're not alone if you think that, "Oh, I'm kicked back, my feet are up, and I'm on my phone scrolling." Like, what better way to recover? That's a
Yeah.
pretty common belief, and we see it when we look at social media usage across amateur athletes. It goes up during a competition week and during the competition. And again, it's because they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're
Hmm.
doing what their coaches prescribed. They're sitting back, they're
Their
relaxing,
their body's not moving. It's easy to feel
Mhm.
like that would be restful.
Restful, right? But, just like we spoke to a little earlier, the brain is using a lot of energy. And when you're scrolling these social media platforms, they've been designed to constantly stimulate your brain. That's why they're addictive. That's why you keep going back to them. What you're doing is you're keeping your brain in a heightened state from a neurological standpoint, and it's using and it's requiring a lot of energy to stay there. And if your body is in that, you know, sympathetic state, then it's not going to divert energy towards digestion, towards recovery. Um, and so, conversely to what we see in amateur athletes, as far as, social media usage going up, I would say that over 90% of the professional or elite amateur status athletes that I know of, either drastically reduce or eliminate social media use altogether uh, during the competition week, or leading up into competition and during competition.
Wow.
And, it's for a variety of reasons, but the primary benefit is, again, it's not that stimulus, that energy tax on your brain. And if you're already having difficulty keeping up with the demands physically of a swim meet weekend through fueling, just keeping your brain always on and active like that is going to just make it harder. You're going to be in a deficit quicker if you're scrolling. So, what to do instead, talking with teammates, even standing up and I would say cheering for teammates on the side of the pool, it's going to use less energy than your brain is going to use, sitting down, resting, but scrolling through social media.
Mm.
I was joking with a coach, in our day, the big bad thing was, video games and they rot your brain. They're so bad for you. We actually know now that they're not the best thing in the world, but playing a video game where there's like, reaction time involved, decision making, stuff like that, that's actually better for you than just scrolling through
Yeah.
social media. Um, Something else that comes to mind when I think about, preparing for events, and I've seen the Dutch open water swimmers do this in international competitions, and I saw it a couple years in a row, and I saw them continue to do it, and they've produced some Olympic gold medal open water swimmers, and that's the group that I've been watching. They do this warm up routine, and one of the things that is included in this routine is two swimmers in a plank position, and they have a lacrosse ball between them, and they're taking turns rolling the lacrosse ball back and forth to each other,
It's
different
about
hands
the
each
size
time.
of it's about the size of a hand, right? A
Yeah,
lacrosse ball? Yeah.
yeah, it is like a little baseball, a little
Yeah.
hard rubber baseball. And the more I got to looking at that drill, they're working on reaction time, they're socially interacting with each other. They're it's a common PT drill for shoulders. That movement and your scaps are back and in place. It's a core function as well. So it's a great thing to do, and it covers a lot of ground, hits, checks a lot of boxes, if you will. So you can find a partner who has a lacrosse ball.
Set it up again. There's two swimmers in a plank position and their heads are facing?
That's right. Their heads are
Yeah.
facing each other, maybe 3 or 4 feet apart.
Okay. And
But
they're
they're not
rolling.
throwing the ball at each other. They're just like, kind of swiftly rolling a lacrosse ball towards each other. And the receiver is, lifting up the hand to stop
Yeah.
the ball and, sending it back to the person across from them.
Yeah. That's great. I love that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's a really good, drill. And, from again, your little reaction time trainers, you see these three-pronged, soft toys are about this big, and you see
Mhm.
them a bunch on, NFL players on Instagram showing how they can, catch the red or the yellow,
Yeah.
um, whenever their coach is calling it out to them. Little things like that, swimmers, can do with each other. It's not going to be too taxing, on your body. You don't want to do it for an hour, but 10 or 15 minutes here and there um, keeps yourself alert, keeps your nervous system right where it needs to be. Helps to deal with some nerves as well. And again, you're getting that social interaction, which is really healthy.
So, any way that the swimmer can stay engaged in a way that isn't too physically exhausting is much better than scrolling on social
Basically,
media.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's good. It's a good note. It's a good note for the adults as well.
for all of us, myself included.
Yes. Yeah. I'm talking about myself. The managing energy, fueling, and recovery. So, if this wasn't just about a championship meet weekend, why are these things important?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, they're life skills, right? You know, we've already touched on a couple of times how much fuel and energy your brain needs to function at a high level to remain alert and focused. And when you're stressed, when you're in a stressful situation, the demands are just that much higher. And just being able to um, fuel appropriately and give yourself the opportunity to give the day your best, whether it's the school day or the work day. Whether it's just giving your family your best day in and day out at the end of a long work day, like all that stuff, takes practice. It takes appropriate fueling. It takes the, ability to regulate emotions. And so what we're doing and, what these young swimmers are learning is going to, it serve them extremely well when they get into the workforce. Swimmers make great employees. They're great, scholastically. Why is that? Well, these long championship meets that we've talked about, that's preparing them for stressors and for situations and for multiple days, stressful situations that we've all been, a part of as an adult. And be able to handle that with a palm is what swimmers do, and that's what they're training on these big meet weekends. Um, it's about much more than just swimming fast and throwing down a PR, or 7 PRs, whatever the case may be. Right? They could be 0 or 7, but at the end of the day, um, the experience and learning and growing is the important part.
Do you have any advice for parents sitting in the stands through a how to fuel and recover for a championship meet?
Yeah, no, I do. Some of it is.
It's a lot for parents too.
Yes, some of it is the same, right? You have to keep yourself fueled so you can be emotionally available for you to handle your kids, highs and lows. No, it's parent's role is really important. A swimmer needs to understand that the parent is going to love them no matter how they perform, how they swim. Again, if they get 0 PRs or 7, just understanding and having the confidence that their parents aren't going to look at them any different is worth its weight in gold when it comes to bringing that mental stress down a notch or two. It's also important that a swimmer is trust what they're doing. So whether that's their taper in the moment, whether that's their warm up, whether that's the last 6 months of training. If a swimmer is going into competition thinking that their coach hasn't prepared them well, then that's going to be another mental stress that they're going to have to fuel and overcome to ultimately perform. Parents' words, whether knowingly or unknowingly, right? If they're criticizing a coach, is going to add to that stress. It's going to put that question mark in a swimmer's mind. And that doesn't mean that a coach should never be questioned, because I think it's really healthy to have that dialogue with the coach and to ask the question so you understand the why and making sure the training is what you think is best for you. But the time to do that is between seasons, preseason, things like that. Once you get into a heavy training block where your body is, and your mind are demanding a lot from you. And certainly once you get into an important competition, that's not the time, for those sorts of roadblocks to be thrown up again. And most times it's not on purpose, but we all just need to be conscious of what we say basically to an athlete who is preparing or in the heat of battle, so to speak.
Yeah, by the time you get to the big meet that you've been excited to swim in all season long, it seems like you're there, you're in it. It's too late to change anything. All of the training's been done,
That's right.
The
The
best seems
ingredients
like
are mixed, the
right.
cake's in the oven, all you got to do is
The
ice it at that
the
point.
best you can do is just embrace it, do what you've learned, do what you've trained,
Yeah,
how you've
positive
practiced.
vibes, right?
Yes.
Positivity. That's
Yes.
why cheering for teammates is huge. You're gonna get that, those positive vibes, and just remembering that even if something doesn't go awesome or perfect, or you don't PR, your highlight event, the entire week and your last 6 months, it isn't a lost cause, right? You're learning, just like we talked about earlier. You're preparing yourself for the next challenge. You can even journal between events, or certainly between sessions or between days. um, I journal after every big competition. Just I kind of autopsy, what went right, what went wrong, leading up into competition, during competition, and I think again, whether it goes awesome or whether it goes really poorly, if you're recording your feelings, your thoughts, what you actually did, you have all that data that you can tweak or replicate in the future if
Yeah.
things are going really well.
Yeah.
So again, if you're in a dark spot and you're just feeling bad about yourself and you're angry about this or that, then you're not going to have the energy, or you're not going to take the time to journal. Positive vibes only.
That's good advice. I think it was Simone Manuel who I saw an interview with her who said she logs her workouts
Mm,
daily because and I'm that's a lot of work. I don't think know that a lot of people would want to do that, but I loved her reasoning. She said she logs her workouts to prove to herself that she can do this, that she can swim this event at this time and she can hit the times that because she's been doing it in practice. She's like, telling herself, look, you've been putting in all this work. You are prepared for this. And
yeah.
I thought that's pretty awesome.
That is awesome. I know a couple other athletes who do that, or have done that during their professional career. I certainly kudos and hats off to
I
them.
know.
I
It
couldn't make
seems like
myself
a
do
lot of
it. This
extra work.
seems like
Yeah.
a lot of work. But yeah, I can certainly see how that would be helpful, and that makes a ton of sense, right?
Hmm.
Look back at this workout you did 7 weeks ago. That's this race isn't going to be any harder than that.
Yeah, yeah. You've survived all these practices over all these months. You can handle this. You got this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the positive energy. I think that's a great note. That's good advice. And, I think another thing that I've learned from a few of the people I've had on here, um, especially Dr. Nori, is the swimmer giving themselves a little time to be disappointed, after a race, but then you can't stay there. Oh, and it was Coach JP as well. You can't stay there. Don't stay there. Give yourself some time to feel it. You're allowed to be upset, but it's really important to not stay in those feelings and kind of focus on the next thing and what did go well and, your parents waiting at home with food or ice cream or your friends, the energy of your friends. And so just finding other things to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, and my term for it is autopsy. And that's really, I think, from a business background or a business world, right? But yeah, you need to autopsy your races and your events, your competitions, and you need to give yourself time to understand like what went wrong. And if you care, then you're going to be upset about that. That's a natural human reaction. Um, but you can't just like live in it, right? You're a person that competes or that swims. Don't let swimming or competing define you. You've got a lot more going on. So use the experience, and flip it around as quickly as you can.
Before we totally wrap up, I wanted to ask about the other memos that you've put out and your thought behind those and what we can expect from future memos from you.
Yeah, sure. It was either the last memo or two memos prior, I forget which, but how skill is built.
Mm-hmm.
And I referenced a book called The Talent Code. And that's one of my favorite books, and it's not a business book, but I've actually, applied a lot of its principles to building skills in non-athletic arenas, and I think it works extraordinarily well. And I think, the author is onto something there, Daniel Cole. So, I no matter what stage of life you're in, or what arena you're competing in, or what skill you're searching for talent or trying to build talent in, I think that the Talent Code is a worthwhile read. And those neurological connections, that's back to this conversation. That's where the electrolytes and staying hydrated and the sodium and having energy for brain support, all the talent and the skill building, all the drills that you've been doing in practice with your coach that some swimmers hate, some swimmers love, all of that is going to be, fuzzy and discombobulated if you're not, properly fueled. So the memos are hopefully, or the articles are hopefully providing some good information, and um, can tie them together to a certain extent. And I have, 7 or 8 more, planned out. And I keep getting questions from parents or from swimmers in our community, and so I'll keep answering those as well, and I'll keep going with it until there's nothing else to put out, which will probably not be for a long time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, there's always questions. There's always more to share and learn. I've really enjoyed them so far because there is just so much to learn about swimming as a parent, supporting a swimmer. Some of those just address like what the goal is here. What are we trying to do here? Why are we
Yeah.
doing this? And I do love seeing your vision for what we're doing, big picture. So even if it's stuff that people already knew, it's a great reminder.
Hmm.
And it's great to just see kind of where you're at and your vision continuing at TAC. So yeah, so thank you
Awesome.
so much for doing that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I'm
Yeah.
glad it's being well received and people are getting some good information from it, and hopefully putting some tidbits into practice here and there. Yeah, I was laughing with, if you swim with me, or if you train with me, then you know that I like to do the long distance, like kind of punishing, nose to the grindstone kind of work. But that's not always what's best for even an endurance athlete, right? There's a reason that you need to do some sprint work. And so I think the next article is going to maybe include some things that I need to myself put into practice.
It's great because you sent it out to all of the TAC community, and it's a range of people that use the Triangle Aquatic Center, from master swimmers, adults, parents who are bringing their little kids who are just learning to swim for the first time, and everything in between. It really does speak to just a range of people wherever they are in their development and their journey.
And that's
So
great to
that's
hear,
another,
because
it's
yeah,
nice.
these are life skills, right?
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, definitely. And I do appreciate having the Triangle Aquatic Center as a resource, a place where people can come and have fun, watch a meet, swim masters, have their kids learn life-saving skill. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for talking to me today. Thanks again for your help getting this started. And yeah, I'm glad that it's your turn to be on here.
Yeah,
It's a good
anytime. Thank you.
good excuse to have you on. Thanks so much, Derek.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed my interview today with Derek Wall, please like, subscribe, follow, and share it with someone else who might enjoy the interview. If you'd like to read more of the memos that Derek shared with our community at the TAC Titans, I'll put the link to the memos in the podcast show notes. Thanks so much for listening today. I'll see y'all next time on the Swim Parent Podcast.